You know, a morning like this, especially if it's, say, during the week, means different things to different people, like snowstorm, right? If you're a child, a kid, and you're going to school, it's probably a real awesome thing. I remember when I was younger, and there was a snowstorm and there was no school, it was the best thing in the world, right? So me and my 4 brothers were dressed up and shoved outside, and we had a day of playing and building forts and throwing snowballs and getting your tongue caught on the fence post and all kinds of stuff. It was awesome. So for a kid, a snowstorm's fantastic, right? But if you're a parent, maybe that's not so awesome, because you've got to, if you have a job outside the home, you've got to find a babysitter, or you got to make some very quick changes to your day. Or if you're a stay-at-home parent, now all of a sudden that quiet time, you know, in the morning around 10 o'clock when everything's done and you can have your cup of tea, that's not going to happen that day. It's different things for different people. So many times the same event, different people will look at it and they will pull different things. Tomorrow morning, for instance, if it's storming, a lot of employees are going to be just thrilled, right? But a lot of business owners aren't going to be that thrilled, because they have to pay the wages for those employees if they're salary, and yet there's not going to be any work done. So the same event can be seen differently by different people depending on where you're coming from. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to start with Numbers chapter 13. And I'm going to read a couple of verses. Numbers chapter 13, starting to read at verse 32. And this is when the spies came back and gave a report. And they brought up, I'm going to put this down a little bit. It seemed to be getting a lot of, there, can you still hear me? Okay. Okay. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eats up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come out of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And then just a couple more verses over in chapter 14. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses, against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God that we had died in this wilderness. And therefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey. Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain, and let us return to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Zephaniah, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that floweth with milk and honey. Same exact event. Same exact event. Most of the spies, they came back and they said that is a land with giants. It's a land that devours its inhabitants. And we saw ourselves as grasshoppers in the land, and they saw us as grasshoppers in the land. And Josh and Caleb came back and said, no, this is a land that's a good land. It's full of milk and honey, and God will deliver us. See, for most of them, they simply just looked at the land. They looked at what was right in front of them. They didn't see past it. They saw the hardship that was there. They saw the inhabitants that were there, and they saw that because of the way they saw themselves. How did they see themselves? They saw them themselves as grasshoppers. In other words, very small. That's not like a kung fu movie. Ah, grasshopper. No, that's not that way at all. It meant that they were small, that they were insects, and they could be stepped on and trampled upon by the giants. And because they saw themselves as grasshoppers, the people of the land also saw themselves as grasshoppers. Did you know that people will not value you usually more than you value yourself? Did you know that? Like if you live long enough to understand that, right? If you would go for a job interview and they say, well, tell us what your strengths are, and then you kind of hum and haw, and tell us what your weaknesses are, and you'd give them a list. Are you going to get that job? No. You know, if you're going in and you're talking to an owner of a company and he or she asks you, you know, what your skills are, and if you give a report that doesn't let them feel that you can actually benefit their company, that they will benefit from hiring you, that they'll be happy that they hired you, you're probably not going to get the job. You know, if you don't see yourself as worthy, if you don't see yourself as able, you're probably not going to get the job. If you just focus on your own weaknesses, you know, we are as grasshoppers. If you focus on your own weaknesses, you're not going to be able to see past the problems that are in front of you. You won't see past that storm that might be raging all around you. And storms don't have to be made of snow. Storms can be storms in your own heart. They can be storms in your own home. They can be storms in your own circumstances, in your relationships, in the difficult things that we face in our lives. There's storms everywhere. Has anybody found that to be true? Yeah. Even when Jesus is there sometimes, right? The disciples found that out when they were crossing the Sea of Galilee. He was asleep, and yet there was a storm raging all around them. Sometimes you have to look past the storm. Sometimes you have to look past what you feel your capabilities are. You see, what you focus on, what you're connected to, is really going to affect how you see yourself. And so what you decide to focus on is really going to have a great impact on your life. The spies that saw themselves as grasshoppers, they were focused on the wrong things. And because they were focused on the wrong things, they went out looking for, you know, reasons why we can't do this almost, right? It's a land that's difficult. It's a land that's hard. It's a land that devours its inhabitants. It's a land of giants. They were focused on the wrong things. The other two, they went and they were focused on something else. And what they were focused on was the promise that God was going to bring them into the promised land. You see, that's really what it's all about. The 10, they went and they didn't really have that conviction that God was able to do it, right? Even though God had freed them from Egypt, and they had all kinds of goods from the people that were their captives before, they went out and they still murmured, right? And then when they were at the Red Sea, they still murmured, right? Because there's the Red Sea. How are we going to get across the Red Sea? And so they murmured. They weren't sure how that was going to happen. And then the Red Sea was parted. And then they went through the Red Sea into the wilderness, and they wandered around. They still didn't know how they were going to make it. And because of that, they had to wander for the 40 years because of doubt. And they wondered every day, how are we going to eat? There's no drive-thrus here. There's no KFC. How are we going to eat? Right? And they were fed every day, and still they murmured, and still they complained. They were focused on the wrong things. And so when they went to spy out the promised land, they brought the same kind of attitude, and they because of their focus, they were only able to see what was directly in front of them. But some of them heard the promise. Some of them believed the promise, and they looked past their situation and were able to see the result past that current situation. They were able to see past what was around them, and they were able to say, no, it's a good land, because they were seeing themselves living there. It's a good land. It's flowing with milk and honey. They were seeing themselves there in the farms and the richness and the orchards and all of the abundance. They saw themselves being there and living that life. And God will help us. We're not helpless. We're not like grasshoppers. No, God has promised us. And so they were looking past the circumstance, and because they were looking past to the solution, they saw the good things that were there. They saw the opportunity that was there. They saw the promise that was there. I want to turn to Joshua chapter 24 just for a second, verses 14 and 15. And he says, "Now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood, and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the God of the Amorites in those lands ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So there's an important point right there. You see, you're the one that decides who you're going to serve. You're the one that's going to decide what you're going to look at. You're the one that ultimately decides what you're going to see when you look outside and look around you. You're the one. You know, the most, would I be able to get a consensus here that probably for a Christian in our lives and as far as this world, the most important thing that can happen is that you receive everlasting life and the promise of the world, of the life to come, right? And have that relationship with Christ and be born again. Wouldn't we all be able to agree that that's probably the most important thing that can happen in our lives? Do I get an amen on that? Amen. Isn't it interesting that for the most important thing in our lives, it was completely up to us to make that decision? Yes, God drew us unto himself, that's true. But we are the ones that had to make that decision. It was a free choice. It was a decision that each and every one of us made. Isn't that not correct? And so if that's a choice, if that most important thing, what should it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? If that is given to us as a free choice, choose you this day whom you will serve, doesn't it make sense then that everything else in our lives is going to be a choice as well? Right? You might not have a choice as to what happens to you, but you certainly have a choice as to how you respond to it. You might not have a choice as to what your circumstance is, but you certainly have the choice as to how you're going to look at it. You see, you're the one that chooses whether or not to look at the giants in the land, or whether or not to look at the milk and honey that's flowing in the land. You're the one that has the opportunity to make the choice as to whether or not you're going to look at and focus on your problems, or whether or not you're going to look at the solutions that are beyond those problems. You see, you can look at the giants, or you can look at the land. And what you look at has an effect on you. Different things that I have seen in my life have had a lasting effect on me. I remember, I always thought that when I went out west and I saw the mountains, that that'd be it. I'd pack up and move out west. Because I saw pictures of them and I had this idea in my mind, but when I actually went out and saw them, I was blown away by them. And they were just more than I thought. But when I was there and in them, I realized, you know what? Atlantic Canada is just as awesome. But I never had that conviction until I actually went and saw them for myself. You know, like when I saw them, it kind of changed me, and it made me I came back. People say now, you know, how long, because I'm from New Brunswick, right? They built that bridge and we all come over. And so people say, how long are you going to be here, Bob? I said, well, I got 20 acres in Emmyvale and a plot in York. I'm not going anywheres. We have 20 acres in Emmyvale and a plot in York. Better way to say it. What you see changes you. I mean, I remember my first trip to Africa. And I was in Ethiopia, and it was just after the famine. And it was really, it was very emotional to see people in the plight that they were. And yes, we went over there and we were facilitating some tons of food. But for me, I came back here and I had an appreciation for the abundance of this land. You know, it's easy to think you're poor when you're not driving a BMW or a Mercedes C-Class. It's easy to think that you're not that well off when you're not vacationing in the best places in the world. It's easy to think that you're not, you know, when you're not wearing $300 shoes. No, you go to some places in the world and you come back and you realize that you are wealthy. You realize that you have everything that you need in this world to get by. everything that you need to survive in this world. I'm sure that everybody here was warm last night. And I'm sure that everybody had the opportunity to have a meal and a cup of hot coffee or whatever it is that you like. It was there, and we had warm clothes to put on. Like, you can. It's in what we choose how we're going to live, and when we see what we focus on affects us. What we focus on will change us. And in our day-to-day lives, we don't all get a chance to jump on a plane and go somewhere and see something new, but what we decide to look at here in our lives will change us. It will make us different than who we are. What we see changes us. Second, in 1 Kings is a great story about Elijah. And I want to read that. And I'm building up here to a point. I'm giving you, just laying a foundation. I want to build up to a point I think is really, really important. In 1 Kings chapter 18, reading at verse 41. And Elijah said unto Ahab, Get thee up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, Go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, There is nothing. And he said, Go again 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, Behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea, like a man's hand. And he said, Go up, say unto Ahab, Prepare thy chariot, and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. What you see. So Elijah, there was a drought, and Elijah was praying for rain. And he was praying earnestly. And Elijah was a man, would you think that he was a person of faith based on this story? Yes, of course he was. Because before any signs were out there, he heard what? What did he hear? The sound of abundance of rain. He really believed that it was going to rain. As a matter of fact, he believed that it was going to rain to such an extent that he heard the sound of abundance of rain. He went up to the top of the mountain and he started to pray, and he sent his servant out and said, Go and tell me what you see. And the servant came back and said there was nothing. Was he deterred? No. He sent them back, and he continued to pray, and he said, Go and see what you see. And he came back and he said there's nothing. Was he deterred? No. He sent them away again. Go and see what you see. He kept praying, and there was nothing. He sent them away again. Go and pray. And he came back, and there was nothing. And again and again. And on the 7th time, he said, I see a cloud, and it's the size of a man's hand. Well, that's what he was going to focus on. That's what was important. He was waiting for something. He was waiting for that first sign. It wasn't a thundercloud. It wasn't a sky full of clouds. It was the cloud the size of a man's hand. And doesn't that feel like the way things go sometimes when we're needing something, when we're looking for an answer to a problem, that we pray and there's nothing happen? And we pray again, and nothing happens. And we pray again, and nothing happens, and again and again. But Elijah was not deterred. He kept on because he was looking past the situation that was around him. He was looking to the solution. He could see it by faith. And he kept on praying until something happened. And that was all that was needed. Just that little thing. That cloud the size of a man's hand. And he said to the king. That's the king he's talking to. Right? If you're talking to one of your friends and you say something that's crazy, that's a little off, if it's your family, it's like, oh, okay, it's just Bob. He's always like that, right? And but you'd be embarrassed if you said that same thing to, I don't know, maybe the pastor, or maybe the mayor, or maybe, you know what I mean? Like somebody that you would hold up. He's talking to the king. He's putting himself out there. There's a cloud in the sky the size of a man's fist. He says, I want you to get in your chariot, and I want you to get out of where you are, because it's going to be a flood. And you don't want the rains to stop you from getting to where you want to be. So he heard the rain when there was no clouds. He saw the rain when there was only the cloud the size of a man's hand. And he would not be deterred by what was around him. And that leads me up to this verse that we're all very familiar with. And listen to this if you would. And listen to a couple of the words there. Faith is the substance of things not seen, the evidence of things hoped for. In other words, faith tells me that it is, even when I can't see it. Faith tells me that it's so, even when I can't feel it. Faith tells me that it's so, even when my circumstances deny it. And I'm the one that decides whether or not I'm going to look at what's around me, or whether I'm going to look at the promise that's just past it. I'm the one that makes that decision. I don't need an angel to come from heaven to tell me that it's okay. To lift my eyes and look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of my faith. I don't need anybody to tell me that it's okay for me to look past the circumstances that I'm in. Circumstances that would tell me that I really have no business being happy. I really have no business having a song in my heart. I really have no business believing that everything is going to work out all right. Faith tells me it's okay for me to look past all of that and to live as if it were true. Faith tells me that my God will supply all of my need according to His riches and glory, even when I'm finding it difficult down here. Faith tells me that I'm going to find my way in this world, even though I don't know what to do next. Faith tells me that I can have that confidence. Faith tells me that I can have that joy. Faith tells me that I can have that life. And maybe it doesn't line up around me, but if I'm going to look past my circumstances, if I'm going to look past what's around me and look to what's just on the other side, then I can live as if it is so. And maybe people around will say, that boy just he's crazy. These people are singing even as the lions are devouring them. That confounded some of the Roman people. How is it that these people are brought out into the amphitheater and they're singing as the lions are released, and they're going into they're being torn asunder, as the scripture says, and they still had faith and they still could see Jesus. So what is it? What is it that you are hoping for? What is it that's the desire of your heart? What is it that you want to see accomplished in your life? Are you looking at that? Are you focusing on that? Or are you focusing on the fact that it doesn't seem to be working out right now? What are you focusing on? What are you looking at? Can you see that university degree? Young people, young person, can you see that degree? Can you see yourself walking across the stage and getting that diploma? Because if you can see it, if it is real to you, it will help you not to feel you've got to go out on Friday night with the rest of your friends. You're going to study. It will make you feel that you don't need to buy a new car because you want the money for tuition and for books, right? Can you see your calling? Can you see? Are you focused on what God has planted in your heart? Maybe it was last year, maybe it was years ago, maybe it was a long time ago, but can you see it? Are you looking at it? Are you focusing on it? Are you living it with that in your sight? And if you can ignore the fact that things just haven't worked out yet. You're still living with that expectation and that hope, and you're moving forward and you're making decisions right now that'll help you to get there. You know, if I know that I want to go right there at that corner, it's going to help me not to go over here, right? If I know I want to go there, I'm going to walk this way. And if I can see where I'm going, if I can see where I want to be, if I can see the result on the other side in my heart, in my mind, by faith, even though it's not physically there, it's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. If I can see that, then I'll see right past all of the things that are between me and that. All of the things that are stopping that from being a reality. Now, I can't see what you see. And you can't see what I see. When I'm looking at what's past my own situation to what I'm believing God for, it's not going to be the same as what you would see. Matter of fact, you and I could look at the exact same thing and see completely different things. Because we come from different places. We have different experiences. I used to live in Nova Scotia, and I had a neighbor, and he was this tall, and he was that wide, and he wouldn't back down from anybody in this place, including Mike if he was here. He just wouldn't. He just would not. But sitting out in the garden and a bumblebee fly by, and he'd just scream, and he'd take a run. He'd just be like a little kid. And I just sit there, and the thing was buzzing around my face, and he'd be just, why? Because he got stung by a bumblebee. And all he sees when he sees a bumblebee is he sees getting stung. I, on the other hand, just remind myself that I am not a flower. And I know that bumblebee's not going to bother me. He just needs to get close enough to know that I'm not a flower, and he's going to go on, right? As long as I don't aggravate it, I'm going to be okay. But when he sees it, he sees something completely different than what I see. Now, a beekeeper would see something completely different again, right? A beekeeper sees that bumblebee going out and doing some work and bringing in the pollen back to the hive, and they're going to make some honey and all that stuff. The beekeeper sees something that's really good. So 3 different people could look at the exact same thing and see it 3 different ways. You can't see things the way I see things because you're not me, and I can't see things the way you see things because I am not you. Which brings me to, I think, one of the most profound scriptures that are in the Bible. It's all the way up in 1 John. 1 John chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. And here it is. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. He says, we're the sons and daughters of God now, even though it doesn't look like it. That what it says? Even though it's not, it does not appear what it shall be. He says, we are now, even though it doesn't look like it. It's raining, even though it doesn't look like it. There's a sound there's a sound of rain, even though it doesn't look like it. We are the sons of God, even though it doesn't look like it. And look what he says next. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. What you see affects what you are. What you look at affects who you are. We shall see him, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And here's the thing. I will look at him, and I will see something different than what you might. We will look at him and might see something different than somebody out there. Jesus said, who am I? Remember that? No. Who am I? Who am I? You are the Son of the living God. When you see him as the Son of the living God, what other option is there? What other choice is there? What other desire is there but to say, my Lord and my Savior? Some people look at him as a really great man. Some people look at him as a teacher. Some people look at him as a false prophet. Some people look at him as a well-meaning but slightly deranged person. And how those people, how each one of those different people will see him affects what happens to them. Would you not agree with that? Because if you really see him, for who he is, it's going to affect who you are. And he doesn't change. It's us. It's us. It's how we look at him that affects how we see him. Now, I enjoy photography. I wouldn't say I'm a great photographer, but I enjoy it. And that's really what it's all about. And when you're taking pictures, one of the things that you can do to affect how something will look is to put a filter on the end of the lens. And you can really make some drastic changes. Like you can look at a sky that would just be a little bit blonde and gray, and you take a filter and you put it on that, and it just pops, and it's just so dramatic, and you can see the different shades of blue that are up there, and it just really, really adds to it. And you can take another filter and you can have a completely different effect. The thing is that what we really see depends on our own filters. It really does. So we all understand about looking and seeing Jesus for who he is going to affect who we are. And if we actually can look at him without any of those filters and just be ourselves and look, it will affect the people that we are. But you know what? The same thing holds true for when you walk out of this place. If you could not look at things based on your own filter, but if you could take on the filter of faith, you'd see past. You know, there's another thing about photography too. If there's a tree here, and the tree's right here, and there's something on the other side of the tree that I really want to take a picture of, but if I'm standing over here, I can focus my lens and see the tree. That's all I'll see. But if I focus past the tree, I could pick out that bird that's on the fence post down there, and the tree will just be blurred. Sometimes I won't even notice it. If you could shoot through a screen and you don't even see it if your focus is on the other. So if I've got the right filter, in other words, I'm not going to look at what's in front of me. I'm going to look at the promise that I have. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And if I really see that without the filter of my own personal experience, what do you mean by the filter of your own personal experience, Bob? It's Moses had it. So my brother Aaron, I'm not a good speaker. Right? That's his filter. Oh, I could never do that. I'm not smart enough. That's my filter. Oh, I'm never going to try to have a relationship again because I've been hurt. That's my filter. But if I can look past my own filter and see the promise that's there, if I can see the thing that I have a desire in my heart for, that I feel that God might have placed in my life, if I see that, even though the evidence is not there, something's going to happen to me. Something's going to change inside of me. And it's going to make that more of a reality than it ever was. Because faith is the substance of things not seen, the evidence of things hoped for. And it's Jesus that's the author and the finisher of my faith, or my walk with him, or my life here on this earth. It's Jesus, not the circumstances around. Some of the happiest people that I ever had the privilege of being around were in some of the most challenging places on the earth. People living on the streets in India, with smiles from ear to ear, not a care in the world. You don't need all this stuff to be happy. You just need to focus on what's really important in your life to be happy. The problem is, you know, you have to, well, even Jesus did it. He said this. Let's turn to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, just for a second. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. We're supposed to look to him. Take the example from him. And what did he do? For the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the Father. So was Jesus focused on what he had to go through? Was he focused on the fact that he was going to be nailed to a cross like a common criminal and suffer and be whipped and be humiliated? Was he focused on that? No. If he did, it might have been a different result. He didn't focus on that. He focused on the joys that was laid before him, and what were those? Certainly wasn't talking about the day he was crucified. It was talking about after. He looked past the cross. He looked past it, and he looked to where he was going. He looked to the purpose that he came to this earth for. Just like we have to look past things in our life to the purpose that was brought here, that we were brought here for. The challenge is, though, and just a couple of verses in Proverbs chapter 4, 25 to 27. Proverbs 4, there we go. Let not thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. All this stuff is true. The problem that we have is there are so many distractions. There are so many things that aren't in themselves real bad, right? There's so many distractions that keep you from just focusing on on the big picture and not on what's all around you. Because if things are good all around, it's easy just to settle right in, right? Easy. You have to not let those things distract you. Don't look to the right, don't look to the left. It's all good, it's all good. Yes, I'm going to stay focused on that. Because the day will come when this won't be here. And it'll just be this difficult part right there. I started working in August. And I really enjoy it. The only time that I don't enjoy it will be tomorrow morning. It's 7 o'clock, and the coffee's been brewed, and the fire's been lit, and the dog's been fed, and I'm sitting in front of the fire with a hot coffee, watching the sun come up, and the dog's sitting at my feet, and the cat's over on the couch, and I'm going, why did I ever go and talk to those people down at CIBC Bank? I don't want to go. I want to stay here till 10 o'clock, right? So if I just focus on that, it's easy. And then I remind myself, oh yeah, I need to put a cab on that tractor that I bought. I got to focus on something down the, oh yeah, I do enjoy work, but it's so easy to get distracted. There's things on the right, things on the left. So, you're going to be in circumstances like Elijah was, when something desperately needs to happen, but there's no evidence of it whatsoever. Not anywhere. It's not to be seen. And you might pray and pray and pray and pray and pray and pray and pray before you see even the smallest hint that it could happen, that it could be good. But in the midst of that, you've got to look past all that stuff and say, you know what? It's just as good as if it is, and walk in it. Just like when I got to say to myself, I sure don't feel like I don't feel very righteous. I got to walk in the faith, in the knowledge that Christ died for my sins, and I am the righteousness of God in Him. The same way, when things are miserable around me, I got to tell myself, you know what? I'm just going to act, and I'm just going to go on as if it's good. And I'm not going to worry. I'm not. Every now and then I like to watch boxing on TV. And there's a fellow down in the States, he doesn't box much now anymore, but his name is Vinny Panzerati. And he calls himself the Tasmanian Devil. And he's intense. And he was a world champion fighter. And he was in a serious, serious car crash. And he was banged up, he almost died, and he was he had bolts screwed into his skull to keep his head from going because his back was broken and all that stuff. And his doctor said, Mr. Panzerati, I'm sorry to tell you that you are never going to step in the ring again. And I was watching his interview, and I looked at that doctor, and I said, Doctor, you don't know the man that I am. You don't know Vinny Panzerati. And he did recover. He went to the gym and pushed weights when he had that thing on his head. And he went back into the ring. He looked past the worst possible scenario, and saw himself back doing what he loved to do. And sometimes, in our own ways, not near as dramatic, but we're called upon over and over again to do the exact same thing. What you focus on is going to determine who you are.